welcome to Phails. My name is Philip Jones, and today I'm joined by Nova Martin, poet, druidess, trans and queer rights activist, and philanthropist. You can wave to everybody, Nova.
Hey there, folks. It's good to be here. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Today, Phil fails at courage and authenticity. And now we'll go to the next part, which is learning your life story.
Okay.
Where were you born?
I was born in Fort Worth, Texas.
Fort Worth?
Mm-hmm.
And that was 47 years ago.
That was in 1977.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like? What kind of family were you born into?
I have no idea what Fort Worth was like in 1977, but I was born into a pretty, like, I'd say, like, simple way I'd put it is a working class family.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Like working class. When I think of Dallas and Fort Worth, I think of Dallas as like financial, like blue collar. And when I think of Fort Worth, I think of like more labor and blue collar and white collars in Dallas, right? It's like,
I mean, I guess you could. I don't think nowadays I don't think that's necessarily the case nowadays.
yeah,
And there's all sorts of, tropes we could say about Fort Worth and Dallas.
right.
But yeah, I mean, I grew up in it's in that late 70s, 80s, early stage suburbanism. I mean, I think it had been happening in California and like New York.
You were in the suburbs of Fort Worth?
Yep. But that's a large part of the way life is now, in cities all over the U.S. But I think it was really starting to kind of blow up. And I was in that I don't know if I'd call it the first wave, but second wave of like kind of suburbs. I think the first wave happened in like California and New York, the suburbs of New York City and New Jersey. But I think in the late 70s and the 80s, I think in Dallas Fort Worth area, Houston, to Austin to some extent, and areas like Phoenix, they started to expand into the suburb culture that's all over the U.S. now.
You were a suburbs kid.
I was, yeah, and in a way, I'm real grateful and thankful for it. I don't know. I was about to say if I had it, no, I wouldn't change it.
Yeah, I was a suburb kid. My folks got divorced, and I was a suburbs kid on my mom's side, and then I was like a small Mississippi town kid on my dad's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We lived in the suburbs of Houston.
Yeah. I think I vaguely remember that you had that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, we, in my area, North Richland Hills area, Mid Cities area of the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex, we call it. I was in more like kind of humble or more working class suburbs, but I had friends who, in more, upper middle class, kind of a little bit, better off or whatnot. So, I'm trying to remember his name, the director who did all those wonderful films that are based out of Chicago, like 16 Candles and
John Hughes.
A lot of like what happens in those films I can relate to, like the kid or the girl who comes from a working class family falls for the
Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, St. Elmo's Fire.
Yeah.
He also I think he did Home Alone, the first one.
I believe he did, but it touches on a little bit of that. But yeah. So I think I think anywhere in the world there's always fascinating kind of variables of like class, like division or class expression, and so very much got to see that and live that in the suburbs I grew up in. Also, just the explosion of kind of consumerism. I remember when my parents got a Sam's Club card, that was like a big deal, right?
That's a big deal.
And that was the early phase of exports largely coming from China. They're figuring out how to sell it to the American market, right? And so, as a kid, I lived that. It's funny, as an adult, I don't live that now at all. I don't even have a Sam's or a Costco. I'm not necessarily against it. I don't know. I went and did that with my mom when I was like, 10 years old.
I did that too.
Yeah, and I don't really. I actually now when I go with friends, it's fascinating. It's like a field trip for me. But I I'd just go to a market or, grocery store to get my stuff,
What kind of work did your folks do?
My father worked for UPS for his entire career, pretty much, which is kind of rare. He started out as a delivery driver, and pr- very rare actually. They allowed him to go into management. It was real rare at that time. You had to be a college graduate to go into management, and he wasn't. But he had, I don't know at what point in his career as a driver, I think he'd been there almost 20 years, 15, 20 years. And they said, well, we're going to bring him on into management. And so he finished his career, management at UPS.
Wow. And what about your mom?
My mom did basically was an admin. I think early in back in the day we call it a secretary. And it worked at a couple of different places as an admin. So those are, I don't know how common those that was for other folks in the suburbs, but yeah. I The suburbs were, well, we lived in an area that had some kind of ruralness to it, so we would go and like ride our bikes and just kind of get lost and do lots of play and grow up with little boys and battle and play war and stuff. Um, Go ride bike, BMX bikes and build
Go to the
jumps.
creek. Did you ever
Do that.
run up and down creeks?
Go catch crawdads.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I have an older brother.
An older brother.
Yep.
And your folks, did they ever get divorced?
They did. They divorced when I was 18 or 19. Yep. Yeah. A big thing that came out of my upbringing that's really a big part of my life, part of my identity and spiritual and philosophical expression is I largely believe it has to do with growing up in the suburbs, because I looked around me and I didn't think in these terms, but I think I was bored. And I saw a bunch of like strip malls and, concrete everywhere. And so I started making up an imaginary world, imaginary planet, culture. And there's a land on it. It's called Kairam. It's like that's the mainland, the main island. That's an island on the planet. And Kairam, I initially developed it to create a fantasy soccer league. I call it football. But because I was into English football, English soccer. And so I made my own fantasy soccer league I created all these these cities and whatnot. But then eventually I started developing it more and more, and I created history, and it became this story of colonialism, of a superpower empire like invading Kairam, and I was going to write like fantasy stories about it. But as I got older, I evolved it, because I'm still going to definitely write stories on it. But the main focus of it for a long time was kind of good versus evil, typical fantasy of like, conquest, war and stuff. That's still within the history, but I don't want to start there with the stories I want to write. I'm not going to go off on the tangent, but I want to take a different approach to it, where I'm going to write about kind of some travel writing of a journalist studying like the soccer in Kairam. So it has, like, I call it fantasy realism. Anyhow, I developed all that from growing up in the suburbs.
When did that start? How old were you when that started?
That started when I was 12 years old, 13. So it's older.
Creating a whole world, a fantasy world.
Yep.
And what was it? Was it drawings? Was it writing? Like, where did it live?
I mean, that's what's funny is it was very creative, but about 99% of it was all up here.
In your mind.
It was all imaginative. No, I had maps. I made maps, so I knew what it looked like. But
real maps, not just maps in your head.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Actual maps that I printed out or colored.
Oh.
But otherwise, I didn't. If I was talented in different ways, maybe I would have drawn characters or something. But I didn't do that. I didn't even do much. I did a little bit of writing, but I always have been developing it to tell myself, oh, it's because I'm gonna write stories about it. I have over the past decade, I've written about 400 pages of the main story that I want to work on. I would like to finish that in the next 5 years, and would like to get it published. But that's a whole long story. I'm managing this because I can take us off on a long tangent with it. It's pretty cool place.
Sounds really cool.
Yeah.
What was the family like? What was your family like? You had an older brother. How much older?
He's 4 years older.
4 years
Yeah,
older.
yeah. We were like pretty close, and we played pretty regularly with each
Mm-hmm.
other. As he got older, he went and did stuff with older kids, and at that point, I'm hanging out, with my crew of friends.
Yeah.
My parents, I grew up in the Methodist, going to a Methodist church every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my parents weren't real heavy-handed about it, other than the fact that we went every Sunday. Um, but my dad was kind of not really kind of. My dad was a bit of a could be a bully, and
He was strict or aggressive.
yep, yep. I mean, I think some of it falls in the realm of abusive, verbally abusive, and was physical on a couple occasions. So that left a lasting impact on me.
He was verbally and physically abusive
Yeah,
to
because I don't
you or to your brother or to your
not
mom.
all of us, all of us. No, not all the time, but
Right.
in moments. And when you talk about trauma, when you experience stuff like that,
Yeah.
that has always put me in a place where I avoid. I'm averse to like conflict, to aggressive type of conflict.
Mm.
Now, if I see somebody being, messed with or something, I will step up to it. I don't do that all the time. I mean, I have my wits about me, but if I observe injustice, then I will step into conflict. But in interpersonal relationships or whatnot, or someone comes at me or something, I don't I don't really like conflict because of that kind of energy that I had growing up around me sometimes. So.
What was it like for you? Like, how did you, was it corporal punishment? Like, did you get spanked with a belt?
hmm Yep. We regularly got spanked for misbehaving at school, or giving up being a handful for my mom if we were out shopping or something. My brother and I go chasing each other around as kids do.
Got
You know.
spanked for being kids.
Yeah, yeah. So, and it's also benefited me because I appreciate kids and children, and I'm not an actual parent, but I've had moments in my life where I've parented, partners' kids, and and I remember the grace that I didn't get. I remember the lack of patience, and so I kind of have like endless patience with kids, and I'm able to philosophically very quickly go, oh well, that's a kid being a kid, you know,
Yeah.
and I didn't, like I said, I didn't get that.
I had a similar experience as you had, and
hmm
I've got two kiddos, and I lived through continuing that cycle of violence for a while
hmm
before waking up
Oh wow,
and
well,
saying, "What the heck are you doing?" and
yeah,
changing.
well, I'm glad for you for changing that, and
Yeah, well, I think my
yeah,
daughters are the
and it's
biggest
for you to be
beneficiaries of
able to
that and
talk.
myself.
Yeah, for
But
you to be able to talk about that that's a big thing. That's a courageous thing.
yeah, yeah, it
There's
was
a lot of people, a lot of men specifically, wouldn't be able to say that.
yeah, it was difficult. I think it was really difficult for my kids, and it
Yeah.
was difficult for me to play out these roles that were modeled
Mm-hmm.
for
Yeah.
me. And it was just, I didn't know any better. And when it came down to overwhelm, I just did what I had experienced.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it was not great for my kids. And my hope is that it's not too late,
Yeah.
that the damage isn't, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
done.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's all different ways that we manage to reformulate trauma, so
Yeah.
you never know. Yeah, my mom was kind of more uh, like, I don't know. I would say the word that comes to mind is like I pause on it because she's not like now when I see her and experience her, but it seemed growing up that she was more kind of passive. And the reason why I bring that up is because I've always been attracted to people and women who are more not passive, who have more, presence and more energy. And to be frank, to be honest, I think my mom was probably just tired, and had to deal with a partner who wasn't real supportive. My dad worked, brought home the money, and came home, watched TV, and slept, and went back to work. And my mom, cooked, took us to school, took us to like practices, whatnot. Um, but when I looked at both my parents, I didn't see any sort of passion. I didn't see much manifestation of interest. My mom did choir and she liked to sing and stuff. But I, I say this, I don't want to sound, I mean, it sounds judgmental, but I also want to be compassionate. Is that I, I didn't see them living life with like zest or interest.
Mm-hmm.
And that left an impact on me. Um, we didn't ever travel. We went on like 2 trips my entire growing up from the time I was, born to 18. And they were fairly like modest trips. I think we went to the Ozarks and we went to the Port Aransas. um, you know, and I I didn't think this stuff as a kid, but when I was about 20 years old, 19, I had an anxiety breakdown and I had to rebuild myself from the ground up. I think there were a number of things going on there. But one of the things, I think I was on the edge of adulthood and didn't have the tools to like lean into being an adult. And I'm not even sure if I still do, but at this point I don't care. And I'm happy to be how I am, to kind of always be kind of forever, somewhat have some childlikeness in me.
There might be a myth of adulthood.
Yeah.
We might just be older.
But I think in the model that I grew up in, and I was sitting here going to UNT, University of North Texas, and my parents had just divorced, and I think, oh, my family's gone. But when I look back, what was my family? It was a pretty, I mean, I don't know if my mom will ever see this, but it was pretty boring, you know.
Or loveless, or
There
passionless.
there was there was there was definitely love, but yeah, passion and interest, and it was manifested a little bit.
Something about like being
I
in
mean,
a
boring.
group that goes out and explores the world together,
Yeah,
adventurers and
yeah.
explorers
We
of
just
life
didn't.
and the
We didn't
world.
do that, really,
Yeah.
and so I developed a very rich imagination,
Mm-hmm.
like made up the standards. Even before that, when I was a kid, I used to do tons of imaginative play because like the life around me, the energy around me wasn't on, you know? And I think I continue to live my life in a way that like, I, I like just the idea that I'm on a trip right now. I live in Washington. Been in Denton. I'm doing a trip within a trip. Come down here and do this interview.
Yeah.
Like let's do it. Like, not that that's like the most adventurous thing, but um, and it's not just about traveling, but just pursue a new interest or go out on a date with this person who I never thought I'd go out on a date with. Let's try it. Let's go for it. Um, like, um, yeah,
Something about saying yes to experience.
yeah, because I lived in this way that was very contained growing up. And then I had this like anxiety breakdown, at 19 and 20. Um, and I had to realize that my parents hadn't hadn't built much of a foundation for me,
They hadn't role
And I don't
modeled
say
for
that, yeah.
you.
And I don't say that to like guilt, to hopefully, and it's not meant to hurt them, but um and I didn't know what to do. Didn't
Well,
know what
maybe
to
they
do.
had taught you how not to live.
Yeah.
And so
It was
they,
very contained and very safe. And so then I'm like, how do you do this? Because I certainly didn't want to live in I mean, no disrespect to, folks, but I didn't want to live in a,
we can give a blanket disclaimer right now that all the words we're saying aren't directed or designed to hurt anybody,
yeah,
but there are authentic experience,
yeah.
and
And
there are words, and we give everybody grace. We give them
yeah,
compassion. They did the best that they could
yeah.
with what they
And,
had,
and everyone's constantly still working. We're always working
and
our
this
tails
is
off.
your
Yeah.
experience
But
and
I
my
didn't want to go
experience.
and like live in a
You don't want to
house,
live that way.
suburbs, and gender resistance comes into this too. And I've reflected, and I thought part of my I call it a breakdown, and that's probably not the most politically correct thing to say, but I was brought to my knees. Could barely live.
When was that?
I was 20 years old. I was actually living in, it's probably about a year or two before your generation showed up.
Yeah, in Denton, Texas.
I was living in Bruce Hall actually when it
Oh, I
happened.
lived in Bruce Hall.
Yeah.
Shout out to Bruce
Yeah,
Hall,
Bruce
y'all.
Hall. Yeah,
Let's go.
the best dorm at
I
UNT.
agree. That was a
They
good
still
dorm.
say that apparently.
It's a good dorm.
Yeah, there was some cool motherfuckers who live there too,
That's right.
and we were there at a good time. Um, but yeah, I suspect that part of it too was. I know I didn't ever think this even. I went and got pretty good therapy the first time for it. I had a relapse about a year or two afterwards, but um, I suspect there was some. I was like, I don't want to go and be a man. Now I never thought that, but I think that was part of it.
When you were a child, did you have any like indicators or any kind of
I I I did. There's a couple that come to mind. I was not, and I I think I started to say this in the conversation earlier. I didn't finish the thought. Being transgender is manifested across people in all different ways. There's no one way that people are trans. It's important for people to really take that in and think about it. Because there's this perception that a trans person, there's a cliche of, and it's valid, it exists, but that like there's children who are 3 years old and they know, you know, a little boy who born and identified as a little boy, and they're like, no, I'm a girl. That happen. It certainly happens, but it doesn't happen with a fair amount of other trans people. I was not like that, but I used to, when I would go to like a friend's house, like a girl, and they'd have like Barbie and stuff. Like I just would get. I love to play with it. Like I loved it.
play with dolls?
Uh-huh. And I remember my mom, and not that that like necessarily defines gender either. Like
Yeah.
boys can play with dolls,
Yeah.
Um, but in the tension of where the society was at the time, I was like, ah. And I remember my mom walking in one time and being like, what are you doing? Kind of. She didn't like hardcore shame me, but she's kind of like, huh. Um, the very earliest memory I have was my grandmother.
Hold on one second.
Yeah,
Boys play with dolls.
they certainly do.
I grew up playing with dolls.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't call them Barbie. I called them G.I. Joe. I called them
Uh,
Star Wars. They were more masculine. Like,
oh
but I
yeah,
played with dolls.
absolutely. I mean,
Playing with dolls is just like fantasizing with
with a figure,
figurines.
yeah,
And
that's
I
true.
guess what you're saying is the
I,
world you were playing within was a
mm-hmm,
more feminine world because it was Barbies, not
mm-hmm,
G.I. Joes.
right. And it was like you don't do that. Now,
You don't play in a feminine
little
environment,
In
skewed environment.
Texas in 1982, I say don't do. I'm
You play your GI
being
Joes,
rhetorical.
okay? You do
That's right.
your,
That's right.
you do your Thundercats.
That's right. Yeah.
You do your.
You don't play with strawberry shortcake. I remember grabbing girls like strawberry shortcake dolls and because it had like a little scent to it.
I don't identify as trans or gay or any of that. I think I'm a cis hetero, white dude. But when I was growing up, I thought that easy bake oven was kind of magic.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was just into sweets.
Yeah.
Probably was, but I was like, that's
Well, it's pretty cool. You could
That's
like
a cool kit.
can't remember how it worked, but you put something
You
in
put
it
something in there,
and then
you
you
get some
pull it out.
brownies out.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Let me get this magical brownie
And
box.
it's funny and it's stupid that like that was it was generally in our time it was a girl's toy.
It was a girl's toy.
Like that like
Everybody likes brownies.
talk about like gender tropes, of like that
Oh,
like
women when
gender
they
roles.
cook,
Yeah. Yeah.
men blow up stuff with
Right.
snake eyes.
Go
Snake
to war.
eyes.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, but I remember an early memory I had was my grandmother. I was staying with her in the summers. It was just she and I for like a week, and I would sleep with her in her bed. And she had come out wearing this gorgeous white gown, looked almost angelic. And my grandmother was quite a bit older than me. Like she was probably, when I was a little child, she was in her 70s, which to me, looked like an old person. And she comes out and she's just has this beautiful white gown on. And I just remember looking at her like mesmerized. I wanted it. And
The
she,
gown.
yeah, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I remember she saw me see it. Like, she's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she was like, talk sweet to me. I was like, "Grandma, you look so beautiful." I was like, "Can I touch you?" And she's like, "Sure, sure." And she got in bed, and I just wanted to cuddle up because it's like the soft, like satin gown. I just wanted to touch it, and it felt so good. It felt so good, and I wanted to be in it, not like in some sort of like sexual way, but
Right.
it just like that, whatever that energy was. I was
You
like,
wanted to be in that
yeah,
dress.
yeah,
You wanted to be in that energy.
yeah, yeah. Um, and I'm kind of made the joke a couple times. I've told this story in public spaces before. I feel like I almost feel like m- m- the feminine's something in my soul just jumped out, in that moment. And I was like 2 years old, 2.5 years old. So I remember that I had some experiences. Some trans women often have like some kind of pattern of like having dressed, played in women's clothing behind the scene, like
Hmm.
secretly. I did that with like my mom's clothes,
You
and
did.
yeah, yeah.
When your mom wasn't there,
When
you
my
put
mom
on her
wasn't there,
clothes.
yeah. And she knows this. I've told her, this stuff, and so she didn't know at the time, but and so I knew, by the time I was like, 14 or 15, I knew something was. No, we didn't have so much language in our culture back then, to talk to orient it. Um, but yeah, I knew, and I had like a tryst with a high school friend, a male, where I would be like I would be feminine presenting, and he'd be like the quote unquote, man. And I remember coming out of like high school, and I used to think, oh God, that would be so awesome to like live as a woman and to like be able to live with him, and and so long answer to your question, but yeah, there were there were more than just that, but there were many, like,
Yeah, I
many
heard
sons.
playing with dolls, like female oriented dolls in
Mhm,
like this feminine world.
mhm,
I heard being just infatuated by beautiful
mhm,
feminine clothing,
mhm,
and then also playing dress up with your
mhm,
mom's clothes
mhm.
and loving putting on all that feminine stuff, and then
Yeah.
also having an experience where you were the feminine
Yeah, yeah,
oriented person in the relationship,
yep,
and that being really powerful for you.
yep.
Dang.
The other thing that was interesting is in my imaginary world, Chiron, um, I ended up deciding that there's no gender in that world.
No gender?
No gender. They
They just
recognize.
had smooth like the dolls do?
Well, no, there's biological sex and difference, but
Oh.
there's not clothing. There's no,
Oh, gender affirming expressions.
yeah, there's
Like
no
it's not
clo
pink is girl,
no type of
blue is
clothing is
boy.
for a certain type of body.
Everybody has
You
everything.
can't, so like if you were to go there, other than the fact that you could see, people who have beards, you could see people who have boobs. Otherwise, like there's not real clear, like we have all these signals in our culture,
Yeah, we do.
right? That just doesn't exist in Kairum. So that was interesting that I like had that concept because it was a way of um
Because women could have beards too, and dudes could have boobs in
ac-
Kyram.
actually that's something I recently modified. I've decided that they're actually in Kairum that they're intersex, meaning that they can have basically what we would call transsexuals. They can have men who have beards and have vaginas, and they can have genetically, they can have women who have boobs and have penises. Now, I hadn't developed that when I was young,
What you have now.
but I have now
Yeah, that's
because I
good.
think that's kind of a badass idea.
What do you think kept all this pent up? What do you think stopped you from expressing in the way that you were designed?
Um, I think fear that I wasn't gonna look pretty, fear that my family wasn't gonna accept me, that they were gonna think I was weird.
Well, heck, you couldn't make your own choices until you left those homes. Like
Right.
you probably couldn't say,
I
"Mom, I want you to start buying me
mm,
skirts," and
and
your mom say, like,
I
"Okay,
have
I will."
no idea I'm pretty sure my mom would have freaked out, but I don't know. Who knows? Um, y- we also just didn't have the language in society back then that we have now. There's always been trans people, always.
Yeah, remember
And
in
there's
MASH there was the guy who was
I didn't watch MASH.
okay.
MASH makes me sad because the theme song always makes me feel sad.
Yeah. Okay, well, scrap MASH, but I think there's always been
Well, there's
transgender
always been
people
there
or
have
transsexual people
there has
or
that's
cross
and
dressers or
so
whatever we
that's
wanted to call it.
the difference is that our society is becoming information is becoming more prevalent,
Hmm.
right? It's the explosion of information from internet, yada yada. Um, there's much more discourse, people are more open, people are becoming more liberated, which certain parts of the population do not like. Um, and so that's it's talked about more, it's named, there's more terminology to it.
Yeah.
We didn't I I didn't had I grown up now, I'm pretty sure when some of these things were happening, I'm pretty sure at 13 and 14, the language that we have now, I could have used it in, 1991, 1992.
Hmm.
But so that kind of was a variable that wasn't present. That
Right.
yeah. But yeah, and then I think as I got older, it was a lot about it's going to be difficult. It's going to take so much work to change. People. I'm going to lose friends. People. I'm going to have to deal with discrimination. People are going to hate me, and some of that people I've learned people do hate me for just how I am. And that's a unfortunately that's a reality in the world. But I will say this, that despite what a lot of people think, um, I I didn't, and to this day I haven't dealt with much overt type of hatred
Like
or
folks get beat up
aggression.
places and
It
they
it
get
it
they
it,
get assaulted
it certainly
some
does happen.
places.
It absolutely happens, and people trans people are murdered.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Many every year, about a couple hundred. Um, in Denton, Texas, in the first couple years of transitioning, I never encountered any sort of, and I really thought I was. I really thought that I was going to go to a grocery store and somebody was just going to square up to me and I expected that. And that didn't happen. But, and this is a large part, I live in Washington State, large part of why is that the more things that it's a bunch of veiled, really subtle micro aggressions, micro exclusions that I got tired of dealing with. Go to the grocery store and people be like, or be in line somewhere waiting to order food and you just get like a long look, or you place your order and people go, there's just a certain pause, that they give, or, women will kind of scoot over, get away from you, like if you're waiting in a line, like they don't want to be too close to you. I don't know what's going to happen, but um so I didn't encounter really overt things. Now I do know trans people who have. It happens regularly. But I thought that was going to be a main issue, and talk about how I thought things were going to go when they started to how they really went. I didn't appreciate it. I didn't do any sort of thought exercise on all the little subtle ways that people were going to exclude, be rude to me or whatnot. Um, and it was those things that ended up exhausting me and hurting me the most. And
Death by a thousand
yeah,
cuts.
yeah. Every single day when I lived in Denton, I was well connected in the community and supported and loved. But it's not like everybody in the entire city like knew me. So any given day, I'd have 10 to 15 instances of just those little bitty, you know, that long pause or that weird look or somebody, doing a double take or something, and got tired of it. And I was like, you know what? I need to get out of here. I need to get out. Now I'm not sure how it'd be in Austin. I know I've spent a fair amount of time in Austin, and generally things are pretty cool. But it's in Washington. I live in a town called Bellingham, and been around Seattle and Tacoma. People don't. The thing I say is where the culture's at up there is people don't care one way or the other. It's not even about gender. That I could have rubber bands, pierced all over my head and go and talk to people, and they're not going to bat an eye because the culture is at a place where they just the general tone. Now, this isn't everywhere, but the general tone, at least in the larger cities, is like, hey, be however you want to be. We don't care, And so that's been a relief, And in my opinion, that's how it should be,
I've kind of watched your progression. I remember when you moved to Denton from Chicago. Is that where you were? Or you were living somewhere else and
I
then you moved
I,
back?
I was living in Chicago, and then I moved to Fort Worth.
Okay.
And then from Fort Worth, I moved into the countryside close to Denton.
Because you hadn't made your transition when we communicated about you finding a design job. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
That was a long time ago.
It was a
You were
long time
still.
ago, yeah.
What was the catalyst for you? Like what said now's the time? Let's do it.
Trees did.
Trees? Trees.
Yeah.
Say more about that.
Yeah. So I was living. I had gradually over the past couple of years started to get a practice of druidry and this is my version of.
Oh yeah, Druidist.
Yeah, this is my version of Druidism. There is very formal Druidism that I'm not going to claim to subscribe to. I have crafted my own. I just go into woods, into forest, and I talk with the forest, and feel, and sometimes hug trees, and
You're a tree hugger.
yeah, and just be with them. There's other. Sometimes I rub my breast on them, but
Now this has gone too far, Nova. You're having sexual relations with forestry.
well, I want to be clear. I don't like really get down with the trees, but
oh my god,
it's more of a ceremony.
I have had enough.
It's more of a ceremonial thing, but yeah. Anyways, I had been kind of like teetering on transition for about, and nobody knew this. I had a partner who knew about it, but I'd been teetering on transitioning for probably about like 5 or 7 years, going back to my time in Chicago and a little bit before I left Texas to go.
When did you know you were a female? When did you know, like, because I imagine there's a lot of things you could be. You could be a gay man. You could be a cross-dresser. You could be
for a long time.
Things.
For a long time, I thought, well, maybe I'm just some version of gay or something. And ironically, I am, but not how I was expecting. And I knew I wasn't a crossdresser because for myself, I hated the term and the application of that. I was like, no, I'm not just. It was the more I would dress, I'd be like, well, I don't want to just be a dude playing around in underwear. I want to actually be a woman.
You want to express
it's not
in the world as a woman.
Yeah. And there's more to it.
You are a woman. You want to be
there's a lot
alignment.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it than than being a woman. But
yeah.
But it's like, yeah, it's like I don't want to just, it's not a play thing. It's a being, And I had moved into this house out in the country near Aubrey, which is close to Denton. And, well, I don't talk about this that much, but I think there was like a spirit. I think it's the man who used to live in the house. Apparently, he was quite an interesting character, and it was tucked in this beautiful grove of oak trees. And I felt like during that time, I really started getting more immersed into, for me, like feminine energy. And I would spend much longer periods. This is right around when the pandemic, COVID kind of hit. I would just, because nothing was going on, I'd spend a lot of time, quote unquote, dressed. And I'd had a girlfriend at the time who knew about it, and she was like, well, it's cool if you want to do it as like kind of a thing, but I'm not going to be with you if you're going to transition. Because I was like, well, what if and she's like, well, I don't, in their opinion, they're like, well, I don't think you're necessarily trans. I just think you enjoy the feeling of being in women's clothing. And I was like, okay. And it was like this big bumbled, it took years to kind of build on this. I moved to another house, funny enough, on that same street, down the street, that was more in the woods, like in deep woods. And I went out and prayed one day walked into the woods. And I had been wrestling with, like, I'd had an attraction to a partner from a previous relationship going back many, many years, talking about 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it had been like a block on me being able to connect with other partners because I was like really infatuated with this partner, which is a weird thing to admit to, but I'm be honest about it. And I'd gone into the woods to pray. I said, you have to like help me let go of this. And I want you to bring light through me. Bring light through me. I, funny enough, did not ask, like, bring my womanness forward. I said, bring love out of my heart. About a month and a half later, I met the person who I would be with when I transitioned, a woman. Initially, our relationship was really good. Now, the first week that I told her about this whole side. I said, well, I've kind of been on the fence about transitioning for a couple years. To my surprise, she was like, that's cool. Like, I see you. You know, I don't care. Cool. You know, most women that I'd come across were like either or cool. I like that, but
Not for me.
not for me. And so I was like, okay. And we ended up initially developing like a pretty good friendship, pretty good relationship. And and then one day for like the fifth time in a row, I'd said to her, I said, you know, I think I'm gonna start hormones like this week. And she just looked at me and she said, babe, I always remember it. That person I don't have the best relationship anymore. I have love and kindness for her, but um, we're probably not in the best place, and maybe we'll never be. I don't know, but I will always remember that she was there in that moment. She looked at me. She said, "You look me right in the eye," and she said, you be yourself." And there was something about that.
Yeah.
With this person at the time who really loved me, saying that to me, and I just thought, you know, I'm gonna do it. And I started like hormones like about a week after that. And as I reflected and I continued to go into the woods more and more, and I would talk to them about bringing this energy that had been inside of me for thousands of years, is the way I look at it. And um, I kind of lost my thought, but I go back to that prayer that I had in the woods, you know, many months before that. They saw me. They knew what needed to happen. They cracked. And the other part of being how I am now is I'm a much more loving person. I'm a much more actively kind person. And I've had to curate that more and more because I've encountered prejudice and hatred. And the more I've gotten that, the more I have learned that you have to be proactively kind. You have to be proactively inclusive. Because if I'm not going to do it after having incurred discrimination and hatred, then no one will, right? I don't know if that makes sense. But I believe that those woods, when I asked them to bring light and love out of me, I believe a big part of it is they saw me. They saw where I was at. And anyways, I believe that trees are the greatest masters on the planet.
Yeah.
I believe almost like they're like demigods.
Your relationship with nature and trees specifically,
Mm-hmm.
but then also your relationship with a loving presence in your life that said,
Someone that said, "Hey,
"You go, girl.
yeah, yeah,"
Like I got you," or
and that helped.
"Be you."
And it really helped.
Which might have been the message you needed to hear from your mom or your dad when you were a kid,
Yeah,
or maybe it was the first person to ever say that to you,
yeah,
and that had that loving bond and that
mm-hmm.
connection that gave you
Yeah,
some sense of like the world's got my back.
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because an ego part of me sometimes resists talking about that because that person and I don't have like the best, you know.
You want to take that away from her
Well,
because
I
y'all
don't.
don't have a good relationship.
That's
A
right.
part of you does.
But the truth part of me says no, that happened and it was a beautiful thing and I'm grateful for it. You know.
Regardless of how your
Yeah,
relationship is now,
yeah,
she had that impact on you in
yeah,
that moment. and it was a tremendous catalyst for you.
It was, yeah. Yeah. No, incurred all sorts of trauma from, ironically, from other stuff that happened in that relationship. About, I was kind of like gate kept on, well, women don't drink water like that. Women don't take their shirts off like that. That was not healthy for my early formation from that same person. But
She wanted to give you the guidelines for being a woman with regard to how to take off a shirt and drink water.
yeah, there were more things than
Oh
that
my
too.
goodness.
But
She was gonna have you be a proper woman.
I don't know what a proper woman is,
This
but
is all just a joke.
okay,
What
yeah.
I'm doing
I
now.
thought that's what we were doing, but yeah, and to
I
be
mean, women are all kind of different ways.
100%, yeah,
They
and to be
take their shirts off
compassionate,
all kind of different ways.
absolutely,
Some of
yeah.
them could
And
just rip that mug.
I take my shirt off proudly, however the hell I want to take my
That's
shirt off.
right.
But to have some compassion for that person, that they were learning just as much as I was learning.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't, you know, they likely know now better ways to engage with a trans person or whatnot. So, but yeah, that was a large part of what got me there. But there was a lot of years of going on. Yeah, I hear it, I feel it. A lot of fear, a lot of, yeah. But now after having done that, I'm fearless in so many more ways now. Like when I did, like my activism and some of the activism I've done, I don't have any fear. I respect people who do.
Your journey, take me through, or would you be willing to take me through like the steps of your change, like the different. So I imagine it didn't start like, it seems like you got boobs.
Mhm.
That's one
You
step.
talking about the change of like
Yeah, you did the
actually after
hormones. Yeah.
hormones?
Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first thing was like knowing, hey, I'm different.
Uh-huh.
And then it was talking to the trees and then having a partner.
I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure if many other people go and talk to trees, but yeah, having
But
a
you
part.
did.
I did. Yeah.
And with just some kind of nature type of natural religion or natural kind of guidance.
Yeah.
You took yourself out in nature and
And
asked for
funny
direction.
enough, a lot of trees are actually, I don't know if the proper term, there is a term for it, I can't remember it, but they're intersects, that they both can seed and be seeded.
Okay.
Elm trees and certain types of oak trees. So maybe they gave me some sort of power and facilitation to do that.
I'm down.
Yeah, but
And then there was the partner there that said, go for it, be
yeah.
you. And the first step, as I heard it, was taking some medicine or some kind of like hormones.
That are that really my body had been waiting for. And my body, I felt so much more comfortable, so much more happy.
What'd the hormones do? Like, what were they?
Estrogen and estradiol is a form of estrogen, and then spironolactone, which blocks testosterone, and progesterone, which kind of just it kind of works with the estrogen as an additional female hormone. They lose a lot of body hair, not facial hair, unfortunately, but a lot of body hair. Change your scent, become more like sweeter smelling. Activate the mammary glands, so you start to get boobs.
You start to get boobs from those pills?
Yep.
Or whatever?
Yeah, we lovingly call them titty skittles.
Titty skittles.
Yeah.
Okay.
For trans women. Now hormones for trans people, trans men do the opposite, right?
They start to lose their breasts.
Well, they don't lose their. I don't think they lose their breasts. That actually usually has to be dealt with through through procedure.
But they start to be more.
They get hair. They get body hair. Their scent changes. They get facial hair. Their voice changes. Actually, that's something that doesn't happen with trans women. Trans men, testosterone, like it kind of, don't know exactly what it does, but it changes the vocal cords.
Whoa.
It makes the voice drop.
You get that dad voice.
They do. Yeah.
You can now command some of.
They do. It's pretty cool.
Stop right there.
It's pretty cool, and I appreciate it because trans women, we don't get that.
But does your voice soften? No.
No, my voice that you hear now is from just work that I've done.
Have you changed your voice?
I have. Yeah.
Like thoughtfully?
Yeah. At this point, it's like it's pretty natural. but I've modeled it a little bit after my mom's East Texas accent. But it took me a while to figure that out too.
Did you have to fake
But,
it until you made it though? Like there was
oh,
imposter vibe. You had
yeah,
to, okay,
and
I'm gonna
then
try on
yeah,
this.
and oftentimes unfortunately with trans women, get most of the bullshit that we get has to do with our voice. People will, I could look just like this and someone will hear your voice, and now this hasn't happened to me in a really long time, but someone will say sir, or whatnot, and that's pretty crushing when that kind of shit happens.
Mm.
Now it hasn't happened for me in a long time, but I've had talk about phases and stuff. You take hormones
Mm-hmm.
and then you start changing. I started changing my after about 3 or 4 months on hormones. That's when I started changing the way I dressed.
You started dressing more
Hmm.
feminine.
Yeah, I started wearing makeup. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
didn't have a clue of how to wear makeup
How the heck did you learn how to do that?
through
You
trial.
could talk to my daughters though.
No,
They're doing it.
so trial and error. I honestly didn't watch a lot of people watch like YouTube videos. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't. I just like would look at other women, or I knew a fair amount of other trans women. I'd kind of hear what they're up to. I
It's
just
artistry. Like
Yeah,
makeup is art. They get
yeah. And I still feel like I have tons to learn,
yeah.
but um but yeah, I did that, and then my sexuality then kind of changed. I realized I was with a woman, and you know the I don't know why I'm feeling like sheepish about it, but the sex that we're having, it was like I was like, oh, this is different. This is this is different from anything I've ever had before. Um, I mean, it's my same body, but my body was changing. My presentation was changing. Um, but it was like more sensual. It was more like focused. It was more, it felt more emotional. And like sex had never felt like that for me.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the past couple years before transitioning, when I still had like my male form, I literally felt like a fish out of water whenever I had sex with women. I hated it. And I thought for a long time, I was like, well, maybe I'm gay. But no, it's because I was in the wrong form for me to have sex with a woman.
Mm.
I hated it.
So the sexual energy changed with
Yeah,
your partner.
and the idea of like the concept of like making love, when in my previous gender, I was like, what the fuck is that? I can't now. Like every time I'm with a woman, it feels like making love because it's so much more emotional. It's more, um, it feels more like equal, and it's just like soul to soul, like
Mm-hmm.
soul sex.
Yeah.
And so that was another thing that's part of it, and then being like, I remember I had a really awesome therapist,
Mm-hmm.
and we were getting on a call, and it's like, so the theme of the week is, and I remember whispering it. I said, I think I'm a lesbian. And my therapist is so cool. My therapist goes, well, Nova, you're a woman, and you talk about how much you enjoy women. Like
Yeah.
I'd been going like girl crazy and stuff, and my spectrum of attraction expanded in terms of all the different types of women that I appreciated and loved. Became
Mm-hmm.
like much bigger, and he's like, yeah, yeah, it makes sense. You're a woman who likes women. You're a lesbian, and so that blew my mind. I didn't never never set out to define that. And then when I looked back at like stuff in my life, like some sexual kind of early sexual fantasies I had, it was about me as being a woman with other women.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So that happened. I didn't, and I thought it's gonna be the opposite because
You thought you would be
I
a
I
woman who liked men.
yeah, I thought it'd be like a hetero woman because I'd been with men before,
Mm-hmm.
as in a feminine state before hormones,
Mm-hmm.
but the hormones actually made me feel gay as fuck. So, so, um, yeah, so that happened, and then additional things that kind of happened was, I had a great therapist that
Mm-hmm.
supported me. Um, Became much more social, had lots more friends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, was called into like activism. I never set out to be an activist. Was called because it's like we were getting like
Yeah,
target.
when your life is
Yeah,
being impacted by
and so
legislature,
part
you're
of my
gonna
personality is like, I'm gonna try and contribute or do something about this,
yeah.
And then I've had a couple procedures, had a couple surgeries. I had a facial surgery, so my face looks a little different from what it did before.
A facial like feminization.
Facial feminization surgery is
I
called.
remember seeing those
Yeah.
pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
It's
the brow and the
mm-hmm.
nose and
Yeah.
the cheeks or the mouth
Mm-hmm.
area.
Essentially, this is my wording on it is that they undo the features that happen from the male puberty that I went through.
Mm.
So that as a child, and I remember the first time I saw myself after I'd taken all the bandages off, I was like, oh, this is the face I remember when I was a child. My features hadn't hardened from male puberty.
Mm.
And also the funny thing is that as a child before puberty, I was a real social butterfly. I was a real gabby kid. I was really charming and lovey-dovey. And once I went through puberty, I became more introverted.
Mm.
That's just an interesting kind of anecdote of development. But yeah, so I had the facial surgery. And then recently, a couple months ago, I got breast augmentation.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had my 2 lowest ribs on each side taken out,
What's that about?
which is pretty metal.
That's pretty metal.
When I tell people that, people are like, damn, Neva, you're
You
hard.
do take a rib from the man to make a lady,
So
right?
they- so
you
they-
made a lady. You made the lady.
Yeah, so
you
they
took one of your own ribs and made the lady.
yeah, I can't remember what the story is there, but yeah, so they say. But
What's the ribs part? What?
So what it does allows for the waist to like cinch in more, so it allows for a more
like
kind
a
of curvy hourglass kind of
glass.
figure.
Yeah, okay. Took out some
Yeah.
ribs and added
And that's
some boots.
not a common. The rib surgery is not a real common one. So and there's some people who think it's a danger, and it is a dangerous surgery. Every surgery can be dangerous, but because it's close to the spinal cord, and some people say, well, we don't know. They've only been doing it for like it's somewhat new, and so people are like, we don't know what the lasting repercussions
Oh my
are.
goodness.
But I'm not worried about it. Like tens of thousands, I don't know about a couple thousands of trans women have had that procedure, and there haven't been any major issues. So, yeah, this recent surgeries, those were back in April, and that's like what I would call it, kind of body sculpting. You know,
Mhm.
I also had a little bit of fat relocated and put into my butt, so my butt's a little bit bigger. It's not like drastically, but
You got that Brazilian
yeah, Brazilian. I had a partial Brazilian butt lift.
partial.
Yeah.
You didn't go full Brazilian.
No. My surgeon was trying to sell that to me, but I don't have that money.
No, I'm not
Yeah.
going all the way.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I think just becoming more active in the trans and queer community has been a part of my journey and experience.
Yeah. Is there any other things you're gonna do as a part of your transition?
Yeah. Well, I moved to Bellingham, Washington recently.
Which is a place where there's more of those kind of people, or what is the move about?
The move was because I knew that Washington would be more of a more accepting like culture society for trans people. And in general, it is. It's not perfect. I thought that actually a walnut tree on Lopez Island gave me the encouragement to move
Through your
through my
Judaism.
through my druidry. I was there praying, and I was there in August last summer, and I was like, just being like, kind of feeling a little brokenhearted that like I'm not gonna find love. And that tree gave me this feeling that said, no, you are worthy of love. You come up here to this area, and your love will be here.
What kind of tree was this?
It's a 150-year-old walnut tree.
Walnut tree.
Actually, black walnut tree.
Well, I need to talk to this walnut tree because
it is a absolute wizardly tree.
Well, because
I'm
gonna have to come up there and talk to this tree because
it is a realm.
I want to find a partner too.
It is truly a realm. So you walk up and underneath this tree, it is truly a realm. It's incredible.
Yeah,
it is my biggest tree, like master.
Your tree, it's your top.
It is now
top tree.
I have a number of them out there, but it is my biggest teacher.
Did you name the tree?
I'm it's funny
goofing off.
Funny enough,
you could have named the tree. That would make sense.
Often there are some trees I've named. Yeah. I just call it the wizardly walnut tree.
Wizardly walnut.
Yeah.
For alliteration.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was of this hope to like find more love and
partner companionship.
Yeah. And I haven't necessarily found that just yet. I I have found that and this is something I touched on it in our conversation earlier a little bit, that the gay women up in for whatever reason in Bellingham are not having it with trans women. My experience at least, that like I've had a couple instances of women like being into me. Now I don't know if they're gay. I think they were. I'm not sure, but like on their own, they're like yeah, vibing. I was like on a dance floor, and I'm very protective of like I don't put anything out until And this one was like, and I was like, okay, she's like dancing all over me pretty much,
Mm-hmm.
and at some point I kind of danced like back. We're like kind of dancing into each other. She said something to me. I turned. I was like, huh? And I was like, I'm a little hard of hearing, and so I said, I'm kind of hard of hearing. Well, what did you say? And she goes and just like backed up and like walked away. And for a minute, I was like, what? Like, what the hell was that? What happened? And then it hit me that maybe because of my voice,
Mm.
because she looked shocked. Um, and yeah, so I don't, I don't know, but that's what it felt like.
It's harder to find a companion because you're a transgender, transsexual woman,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like lesbian women aren't open to that for companionship.
It seems, but who knows? I mean, maybe there's one of like 100,000 out there that will meet me and adore me and want to like love me, but that's kind of what I found. And that was like a hard truth that I kind of came to. There was another instance of a woman walking down the street, and she said something like, "You're fine, you're fucking hot," and I was like, I turned around and I was like, "Do what?" and 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 I said, I can't remember what I said to her. It's like I said something like, you can tell me that all night long or something, and 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 she goes again. She's like, uh, and just
When she gets that hint
fucking
of
walked off.
man,
Yeah.
when she gets that hint of like you used to be a
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
or there's a
Or I'm
masculine
or I'm
thing a
not
part of
or I'm
you.
a certain type of woman or something, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. But I for a while, for a little bit, that really got me down because I was like, I moved up here hoping I'd find it. And I'd gotten kind of bitter and upset about it. And I was like, I took some mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms, and I
Mhm.
had just a great trip. And I came out of that and I thought, you know what? Fuck it. I'm I'm as I am,
Yeah.
and I'm proud of who I am. I love who I am. And I was thinking about having like bottom surgery, having a change, switching my genitals into a vagina.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of leaning on not doing that now because I've experienced like this kind of like this, you know, y- I don't know what to call it, but like just, exclusion or whatnot. I'm like, fuck it. I'm a chick with a dick. I'm a beautiful, nice looking, pretty good shape, good body, and very good at the lesbian arts woman.
She's talking about cunnilingus right there. I think that's what she's talking
very,
about.
very, very, very good with
This is
my
getting adult, y'all.
yeah, very good with my mouth and
Put your
lips.
children to bed now and continue with our
And
discussion.
my hands too and whatnot. I'm gonna stop there. So
All your faculties
yeah,
have been oriented towards
yeah,
a female body.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so, anyways,
And pleasure.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Y'all hear that, ladies? Y'all hear that?
call me. No, but I'm I'm not gonna let people make me feel bad about how I am,
Yeah.
and so I've gotten to a point where I feel like really happy and healthy with it all. So, and it's ever evolving.
I'm gonna ask you about some of your artistry that I've seen
Mm-hmm.
on your social media
Mm-hmm.
places. Just
Yeah.
kind of what underpins it.
On Star Fox Nova on Instagram. Sorry.
Oh no, dude, where do folks
Yeah.
find you on social media?
Star Fox Nova on Instagram.
When I put these all out, I'll put
You can
links
put yeah.
in the
Yeah.
descriptions, and
That was pretty. That
I
was
want to make
pretty
sure
geeky of
everybody
me.
finds their way to
Yeah.
you.
So some of the stuff you've seen there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to talk a little bit about it's art. It seems to me to be art. I'll mention a couple of them.
Okay.
The things that I've noticed is like motifs.
Yeah.
you have a current motif that's about an audition.
Oh yeah, I haven't done one of those in a couple days, but yeah.
Yeah, you've got this thing where it's like, I'm ready for the
It's
audition. And you kind of
yeah,
do it in this, like,
it's
in
it's
my
both.
mind, I think it's like there's going to be a sexual component to this audition.
My mom saw some of these and she's like, "Neva, you're not doing porn, are you?" And I took it as a moment to say, "Well, what if I do porn, Mom? You know,
Yeah.
I am actually thinking about maybe doing trying porn out, but not that it's easy to like that. Not that it's like real, you know, just easy to do porn, but it's hard work. But
Everything's
the
hard work. Anything you want to try
100%.
and try to
That's a
break
very
into an
good.
industry.
That's a very
I
good
thought I was
point.
going to just do a couple of these interviews and then
No,
be like, I've got a bunch of viewers. I found an audience. And that's not the truth.
that's
You
right,
have to
and
put
that's something you
hard
don't talk
work,
about.
time, energy, effort. You have to learn and grow. You have to fail.
Hmm.
You've got to, it's a lot of hard work.
And if you love something, you have to never stop.
You got to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Whether that's
But with
pornography or whether that's being a woman or whether that's being an interviewer and someone who's learning from
well,
people
poetry. I keep
or being a poet.
the world in general like doesn't really care about poetry.
Yeah.
Generally, now there's a lot of poetry lovers out there, but I mean, it's a rare few people who can make money, you know, a
Yeah.
living as a poet. But that doesn't stop me. I could do it all the time.
Tell me about the audition. Where did this come from?
The audition
Where
thing.
did it start?
The audition thing is kind of
What
like,
does it mean?
I think after I had surgery and I just started, you know, kind of feeling myself more and being like feeling good about how I looked and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Felt more of the way my soul had always been longing to see me. I had a little bit more sexual kind of, you know, sass.
Sexual vibe.
Yeah.
Sassy sass.
And it's kind of it's kind of initially I think planning on like showing it off, but then the more I got into it, and the shtick is what I do is like, hey there boys, I'm here for the audition.
Yeah.
And really what it's about, what's hiding there in there is that I'm auditioning for the world to make sure, and I'm joking here, auditioning for the mold of what it is to be a woman. You know, and then ironically I'm toying with the idea, it's like, well, I'm hypersexual, you know, I'm here for the audition.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a bit of like things kind of colliding, you know, on purpose, you know, with it.
It does feel multiple levels. Like
Yeah, there's some meta stuff going on.
Right.
It's more than it's much more than me just being like cute and sassy.
It's easy to see a superficial layer of like, oh, this person is playing a part of like a casting couch type of thing. And then there's another one where it's like, oh, this is a human being leaning into their sexuality as a selling point or as a part of negotiation. It's like, hey, I'm a woman. I'm a beautiful woman. I have sexuality as a part of, you know, the discourse.
Yeah.
I didn't think of it as like coming out to the world though. That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think the more I continue, and there's stupid little snapshots. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything phenomenal about it, really. You know, they're just stupid little candid moments.
But I wouldn't.
Oh no,
I wouldn't.
Well,
I mean, you can if you want, but I don't think they're stupid. I think it's really.
They're dorky.
I think it's art.
Yeah,
and I think you're saying something. You're doing these over and over again. There's something you're trying to say to the world through this expression. I think it's easy to call it stupid or dorky, but it's like,
well, I think
there is something.
The more I do it, the more of a statement it becomes. On that I am auditioning to the world. Am I going to get the world's acceptance? You know, not that I need it, but it's a joke, right? It's like,
well, do you?
I mean, I think I want to be accepted for how I am. You know, I think everybody probably wants something like that.
What's the response been
to the audition videos? I don't know. People don't say anything about it. I mean, people, you know, will every now and then somebody will like be like, love this one or something, or somebody will say, you look really cute in this, or you know. But so people have noticed because I read poetry at a burlesque festival this past weekend. It's called FemFest. It's really awesome. And somebody there was like, oh, I love the audition stuff you're doing. You know, I can't remember who it was, but they had seen it. So I don't really know what people's view.
It's performance art.
Yeah. Yeah. But I have a lot of poetry though that I read though too that
Yeah,
has
you do.
much more like substance to it than
Yeah.
the audition videos. But
Well, do you want to talk about your poetry a little bit?
I mean, a lot of my poetry these days, well, for the past like year or two, my poetry's been a lot of like woman to woman eroticism and spirituality, celebrating that. Sometimes it's erotic and, naughty. Sometimes it's more talking about the spiritual nature of woman to woman relationships,
Mm-hmm.
celebrating that. Um, Oftentimes I talk about, some element of worshiping trees and connections to being in the forest or to
Druidry.
druidry. I've been m- inc- ins- insanely, incredibly in love with the moon since I transitioned. So often I have a lot of poems that I've written about the
I'm
moon.
in love with the moon too.
Yeah,
I didn't transition, but I love the moon.
the moon is
I'll
just
phase the moon
the
whenever I go
moon.
out there. I like that's the phase,
Uh-huh.
and then I'll be like, "What's the name of this moon
Yeah,
this month?"
she's a lovely lady.
I like the moon.
Um, but yeah, and then lately I've been
Is the
focused.
moon a lady?
I think
Okay,
the moon's
I'll
a
go
lady,
with
but
that. Yeah.
um, but yeah, lately I've been writing a lot about like trans stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like trans pride stuff. We call it in the trans community T for T, which means trans for trans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, I had some really fun, lovely, exciting sex with a trans man a couple weeks ago, and
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
um, and
Is
really,
that classified as lesbianism?
I mean, some people could call it that, but that is we call it kind of T for T, just a trans person for a trans person.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really fun and cool because it was like this new experience and you know, um, new concepts for me, but a new connection, a new way of connecting. And
Mm-hmm.
I have there's a group of about 200 or so trans people in Bellingham. We have a Discord server, we have a little community, and they have been just uh, I'm trying to think, can't pick the right word, but like a godsend to find them.
Yeah.
Of There's someone specifically in that group. His name's Kit, and I've he and I have like we message a lot on Instagram, and he's helped me kind of work through the exclusion that I've faced from like some gay women up in Bellingham, and he's helped kind of turn me on to the idea that trans people are really good and safe to other trans people. So like kind of open my mind to like that we call it T for T relationships and love and connection. Um and so that finding that group and being a part of it has been awesome. And they're quite a bit younger than I am in general. And they're kind of punky and like gender punks and like gender fluid. And I love it. I absolutely love it. They're yeah, there's just like a punk element to the culture, and I've realized that's been a big aha for me is like my poetry is like I realized this like literally in the past week. That's why I'm just mumbling about it. But how punk my poetry is. And I never thought that stuff, but it's always kind of been that way. It's always been very fairly irreverent, always critiquing like culture in some manner,
Yeah.
you know, or if it's celebratory something that we don't traditionally, typically do in broader culture. So that was a long ramble, but that's a lot of what my poetry's about. I think that's where that started. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Would you read a poem?
Sure. Um, I guess I'll read this one.
What's up? What just happened?
Nothing. I mean, it's a provocateur piece,
Okay.
and it's expressing some deep emotions. A lot of what I've been kind of orienting lately. It's called Beyond a Patriarchy. Beyond the patriarchy of woman and man, outside our privilege and trust, beyond the village, near the chunky bark oaks, strolls the witch of the trans woman. Mutterings of man and woman, bumbling like flies, facades for death and dying, banal decay, just a little over the tall grass in the air of dancing dust. Does this witch ever age? But the moonlight decides the mythology where she sits. What side is the wind? What side is the town? What side are the minds of the people within who struggle to reach beyond the without? These souls cannot go. They know only containment, keep records of gossip and measure of contempt. Distrust, distrust, distrust. The sovereign rule breaker. She shots high through the sky with a glow in her eye. The trans woman witch harvests life and learns freedom. Able to find all this without love, strolling the dark midnight forest.
Yeah.
I wrote that like literally like 4 days ago, and
You did.
I can't remember if I read it or shared it.
Hot off the presses.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, is there anything you want to talk about before we wrap up? Anything you feel like we've missed?
I'm trying to think.
I'm wondering what your
Yeah.
relationship is with your family post all of this, with your dad, with your mom,
Well,
with your brother.
my father I don't really talk to, which I had drawn some lines on that before I transitioned.
There's an estrangement there.
Yeah, yeah. But I did recently try and reach back out to him, and he already knew about my transition, but I said, you know, hey, look, this is how I am. My name is this, da da da. And he messaged back and he said, well, you know, I do respect you, but I'm gonna continue to call you by your birth name. It's like, as my best friend said, well, that's not respect.
Yeah, that's not respect.
And so, so I decided I've just left that one sitting there. But I have a, you know, pretty good relationship with my brother. Yeah, he was initially when I came out, he was really supportive, and that surprised me.
You said initially.
When I initially came out, I just
But
mean
he's still supportive.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
he is. Yeah, yeah. I think he realizes I'm kind of a nut, but that I'm even more, you know. But he's never said an unkind word to me.
Yeah.
So, my mom, I think, you know, loves me. I think she hasn't got everything right, but you know, she's always been loving, and I've been fortunate, you know, of that. I think at times, I think she not regrets, but maybe misses my previous kind of way, and feels like she lost, you know, like a son. And I think that's been kind of a little hard for her. But she knows that I'm much more alive now. She knows I'm much more fun. She knows I'm much more loving and kind. And so I think overall she thinks it's a good thing. And
Yeah,
so
silly
it's
question.
it's complex.
I got a
but-
silly question.
Sure.
Do you think y'all ever share clothes?
I don't think so. Probably not now
She
because
didn't have the same style.
my boobs are bigger than hers now.
Oh my goodness. With skirts.
She hates that.
Yeah.
I mean,
She does. She's like,
I made some joke even before I had my boobs naturally got pretty big, and I was like, I think they're bigger than yours. She was, oh no, they're not. It was funny.
y'all got into like a lady kerfuffle there about boobs.
Not real serious, but it was pretty funny. I was like, that's
Do ladies do? I know guys do the whole penis size thing. Do ladies have the same boob size
Oh.
thing?
I mean, not that I've run into.
Okay.
No, I mean, no, not that might happen.
Just with your mom.
Just with my
That's
mom.
funny.
Maybe it's something that happens with mom and daughters, but
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, the only other two things that come to mind that talk about is another thing that I have going on is I'm trying to open up I want to open up a lesbian honky tonk.
Lesbian. That's how you say
That's how my mom used to
a
say it.
lesbian.
My mom back when I was growing up, she said, "Well, she's a lesbian." Like
lesbian. You lean into the lesbian.
Yeah, like it was
I
something.
wonder how far I could draw lesbian. You just draw that one out.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to open up a lesbian honky tonk out in Washington. I'd open it here, but I mean, I'd open it in Texas. I'm not necessarily averse to it, but I just basically need people to give me money, you know. But so I'm trying to find the money. I'm trading. I'm learning how to trade stock. So
You doing some stock trading?
day trading stuff. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to make my money that way, but I'm trying to find or raise money to to bring that to life. And there's
What's the
some.
difference between a regular honky tonk
It's
bar
just
and a
so
lesbian honky tonk bar?
that's kind of a little bit of a shtick because it's the fun thing to say. But
Hmm.
specifically, there's a concept in queer space and feminist queer space. It's called Flinta, and it's a German acronym, and I should know that what all the letters stand for, but it's feminist, lesbian. I don't know if the I is for inclusive or intersex, and the T is for trans, but it aligns with German words originally. What it means is it's basically a feminist space that embodies feminist ideals that is later wave, very contemporary wave feminism that's inclusive of trans people and non-binary people
Hmm.
and gender fluidity.
Yeah.
So it just means to create a space that is safe for all that.
It's a safe space for honky tonk and people
Yeah. And so
of all kinds.
and we want to do honky tonk because I like country music.
Hmm.
I like kind of older country music or like alt country music. Um, but I want to have a honky tonk. I've always wanted to have a little honky tonk bar, and the idea that we're gonna make it gay as fuck and and feminist and queer and lesbian and whatnot. Like it's like we get to kind of co-opt something that's typically kind of a good old boys thing.
Hmm.
And it's it's gonna be quirky and poppy. I have the whole vision for it. I know exactly how it's gonna
Well,
be.
you're a musician too.
I am.
I've seen
I'm
some
a
stuff of you playing the guitar
yeah.
and singing.
I'm a modest musician, but um yeah, and we want to like host bring in like female, you know, artists and just promote that. We want it to be a community space and we're gonna have a feminist library and um it's gonna be really fun. And
Boobs, booze, and books.
well, I was gonna say the name, but I don't know if I should say it because somebody could steal it. But people already have been seeing me promote it a little bit. But I was thinking about calling it Mama's Little Cowgirl.
Yeah, Mama's little cow.
But if anybody wants to take that,
Don't take this
go for
name,
it.
y'all.
Yeah.
This is Novus.
Anyways,
Mama's little cowgirl.
Little Cowgirl. I told my mom that. She's like, no, I don't like that.
You're on to something.
Yeah. So, yeah. Right. So that's the big thing. And then the only last thing that I'd say that is worth mentioning is to stand up for trans people.
Mm-hmm.
We need that. We need that from um we're being targeted by a major political party, and we need people to say no more. We need people to show up at the polls and say this is nonsense.
Yeah.
Get this out of politics.
Yeah.
A politics of hate and discrimination.
It's a distraction.
Oh, it's totally a distraction.
We shouldn't be
Yeah.
legislating
unfortunately,
hate and
yeah.
discrimination.
But the laws are going through. Trans children in Texas can no longer get counseling, can no longer get like puberty blockers, because it was outlawed with last year.
This might be a place where you can help me.
Yeah.
Because I've had discussions with folks before, and I've thought I've structured it this way.
I know where this is going. I have your answer.
I've structured it this way.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, when I was young, I listened to rap music. A lot of it. It was right around the time they started putting those stickers on the rap music that was like parents advisory, and I was like, those were the ones I needed to get.
Yeah.
And I exposed myself to a whole nother world, a whole nother culture. And there was cussing, and there was a lot of different, drug dealing, and just like these storytelling of kind of a underworld life in the way that they would talk about women, gangster rap and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think I was influenced by that. And the way that influenced me was probably selling dime bags and selling pot and like living a life where I kind of went that direction in some way, shape, or form. And, later on in my life, I realized, well, I don't think that's the best way. I probably shouldn't have been influenced that way. And when I think about the things I did as a result of that, it was, I had some marijuana tickets and I had different exposures with the law as a result of marijuana. When I think about applying that same thing to sexuality and gender discourse and like the influence of some of this stuff.
You're saying how does
I
a
wouldn't
young
wake up
person.
if I was exposed to transsexuality, transgender, and all that stuff as a
Mhm.
child and influenced in that way. What would happen if I woke up as a 23-year-old man or 30-year-old man and said, like, now not only I don't have like pot convictions, but I have like boobs
Mhm.
and a vagina, and I realized, wait, that was just influence.
So
That wasn't
so that
really
yeah,
a
so
lifestyle.
that rarely happens. It's like less than 1% of people who transition detransition. And people who detransition oftentimes it's not necessarily that they actively want to detransition. They often detransition because it was too difficult. They didn't have family support or they were discriminated against. They just couldn't do it. Very, very, very rarely do people actually have true like regret and remorse over doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Almost non-existent.
Yeah.
It does happen, and that's valid. And I think, you know, I think I think everybody's valid, in terms of where people end up. But I think the question hiding in there is how does a child know, you know? But
What is influence versus
but
what
I
is
but I would
internal
also say like
intuition?
being into like rap music is much different than feeling the way that your body is,
Yeah, I want to just
and so
that's a
yeah,
simple and perhaps silly
yeah,
example, but I think the root of it is, how does one discern between an inner motivation and an
hmm
inner knowing, an inner intuition of who am I? What
hmm
does this all mean? And an outer motivation of, I like this, this is cool, this is, I'm
well, I mean,
excited
it's
by
probably
this movement.
right, and it's maybe not a pure delineation of one or the other sometimes,
Hmm.
but um, I mean, I don't. Using your own words, but the inner thing is it means that it arises. It's a feeling inside of you. It's a voice that you can't turn away,
Hmm.
and that's generally how what Miss. I hate to really want to pause on speaking for our trans people, but I do think generally it's something that you hear, you feel, you can't avoid, you know,
Hmm.
and so that the fact that it is inner almost like clarifies it, right? It's like I knew I didn't transition until I was 44,
Yeah. But you
but
knew
I knew something was up by the time I was like 13 years old, you know?
you knew real
I felt
young.
that energy.
You knew real young.
That energy was manifesting in me.
I mean,
And
so the law is just half of that. Then how do you get parents to
well, I mean,
really look at
a
who
good
what kind of kids they have so that they can have that autonomy and
well,
independence?
I think parents should educate themselves. They should learn how to support, a child who is trans. I mean, in my opinion, a great parent receives a child where the child's at. Now, you have to parent sometimes. You have to put scaffolding down.
Yeah.
But, if I, you know, if I was a musician and I loved, playing, violin or whatnot,
Mhm.
and I had done that with my child growing up, and I'd hoped that they, wanted to, you know, play piano, violin, whatnot, and they came to me one day and they said, I actually want to learn how to repair engines. I like cars.
Yeah.
For me, maybe I wished and hoped that they would play, do music.
Right.
But I say, you know what, kiddo? I don't know any mechanics, but I'm gonna find some,
Let's find a
and we're gonna
mechanic and
yeah.
let's get a beater
And that's
car
like
and start
that
looking at
in
it.
my mind, that as a parent, you're you're opening the you're helping your child open the doors that they want to open,
You're meeting them
you
where
know?
they are,
Yeah.
and you're helping them realize
And a child that says,
excitement and passion
I
that's from within
yeah,
themselves.
yeah. And if a child says I feel this way, then I, I think parents should educate themselves and figure out how to best support it,
That makes
their
sense to
child.
me. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's, the other thing about why when young people having specifically access to puberty blockers, is that it helps their overall transition, their body. I lived in under male hormones for 44 years, and that was very tough on my body in terms of being a woman's body. Um, had I like transitioned had I known when I was 13 and, I had the structure in place and support and could have come out, I would look a bit different. My transition would have gone quite a bit different. My
Mhm.
voice would actually sound different. People who are able to block puberty hormones, when they're before they go through that first puberty, end up having a more fulfilling, transition generally. But it just some things kind of just go a little smoother for some people. But I want to be clear, later stage people who transition are beautiful and just as valid.
Yeah.
But I think that's why it's important for it's one reason why it's important for, youth to be able to have access to those medicines, trans youth to have access to those medicines,
Yeah.
you know?
Gosh, it seems young though, like 13 and 12. But it does make sense what you're saying. Like you know, you start playing with dolls that are more feminine worlds, and you're expressing that all stuff is clear. So why not let them
Well,
like kind
and
of
and also with with youth treatment, it's not talking about proactively giving them the other hormones.
it's
It's
just
just about
stopping something.
that's right. It's just helping make sure that that male, in the case of a trans, feminine person, that the male hormones don't start kicking on, or with a young trans mask person, that the female hormones don't start kicking on, and then when they turn 18, they then start taking the actual active hormones, and that's where the fuller development happens. So
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about. But anyways, that's a big topic.
There's a lot, yeah. There's a lot of different stuff in this area. One of them is female athletes
Hmm.
that are
So
transgender,
I am
transsexual, that
I
like
am a trans female athlete. I've played soccer
right.
in women's
But
leagues. So,
there's this recent experience where a man, I think it was in Canada, you might
hmm
have seen this, where a man identified as a woman and then went into a heavy lifting
hmm
competition and just like demolished it. And
I haven't seen that. I saw there's a recent. I
he
should
like
know
broke a record for female
I should know her name.
weightlifting.
There's a track athlete in Oregon recently.
Hmm.
Um,
Where was a
high
transgender.
schools, a trans young trans female.
What do you think about that? Do you think?
So I I think that I think it's really interesting that people who aren't into any of these sports suddenly care about it when they hear something about generally it's a trans woman issue. So, like, I'm not meaning to sound like to knock you, but
Yeah,
do you care about weightlifting? Or
I
do
don't.
do people care about high school track? I mean, some people do certainly, but do people care about collegiate women's swimming? Suddenly they do, but so I think that the athletes within sports, anybody, and I say this with a little bit of sass because
Hmm.
I'm a competitive, I mean, not like high competitive, but I'm a very competitive person. I'm a competitive athlete. I welcome competition. And other women that I've talked to, and when I played soccer and I was the first openly transgender soccer player in the Fort Worth Adult League.
Hmm.
I was thankful for that associations to their support. Um, I generally felt those women out there were like, "Yeah, let's play, let's
Yeah.
play." People who want to compete. It's gonna be occasional person who can't handle something, who's like, is butthurt about something, but a real athlete is up for it. And I don't think trans women don't have any sort of like they're still working out studies, but they don't have any sort of incredible competitive advantage. That's a myth. And in fact,
Well,
most of them lose a lot of their performance edge through transitioning.
hmm.
So, and I've lost. I'm a runner too, not necessarily competitive, but when I started transitioning, my general running pace was like an 8 minute, like 12-second running pace.
Hmm.
Now it's about 10 minutes. That's a that is a big change.
So you're saying through the transition, the hormones and the things that you take
Hmm.
impact your strength or your endurance.
Oh, 100%. I can't. I'm really weak in my arms. I can't lift. I can't open jars. I
What
can't.
about, you know what? I don't really have a dog in this fight. I'll just say right off the bat, just like you said, I don't care about weightlifting. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care about these things. I guess I just watch Joe Rogan. Goodness. And I've heard people talk about it. And
I
so
don't really care for Joe Rogan, but
now I've got an
um,
opportunity to ask someone that
yeah.
might have some more
I mean,
experience on it. And so then
I
I'm
I
just
think like my response
curious.
to it is if you want to start talking about, trans women, transgender athletes
Hmm.
playing women's sports, then I think you should go spend some time specifically focusing on that woman's sport and getting to know it first before you start commenting on it.
Yeah.
Because then if you do that, then I'll feel like you have some perspective, and I'll feel like you care, and I'll feel like you're educated. And I don't mean that to sound, I mean that in
Yeah.
general to anyone.
Yeah.
It's just real funny that people suddenly care about women's collegiate swimming, um,
Yeah.
who
I don't know about the
know
swimming
anything
one.
don't know anything
But
about
I
it.
guess
You know,
I think the place where there could be like these loopholes where, but yeah, you're right. Let's drop that one.
yeah.
I don't really care about these sports. I guess what I want is for folks
Oftentimes
to
people think of it as
have a chance.
fairness, but it's not.
Yeah,
But
that's what I think of
but
it as fairness.
right, but competitive sports, it's not fair. It's
But we do divide feminine and masculine in
you
these.
you know who had to go through this stuff? Black folks had to go through this stuff in the 1940s and the 1950s because they found that African American athletes actually could compete and could kick some ass. And for a long time they were kept out of sports
Mm-hmm.
because the poor like white supremacist athletes couldn't handle it. Their egos couldn't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Um and you know what? Sports are better for it. Sports should anyone should be able to compete in the class that they identify with. And so, um, I don't know. I can't. Fairness is not n- in sport. There's no one athlete who is the same as another athlete. It's never going to be fair. And
But we have what's
but
it
there's
called,
but
sexual dimorphism, that
sure.
where like
But if you compare it, there's no
men and
trans.
women have different form bodies.
Sure,
And some
but after hormones, a trans woman's body is the same
But
as
I don't think identifying as female requires hormones. I could
well
say
that
tomorrow that I
there's
identify as a female
I
and
don't know
then
about
go
that.
and compete.
Well, see, I don't know about that. I think different associations. I mean, I could say that like perhaps there's standards in terms of yeah. I don't know. I think if you just say, hey, I'm this way or that, now I want to compete. Like what if I said, I don't know, I'm making this up, but what if I said suddenly started saying I'm Jewish, I want to compete in a certain Jewish like athletic competition or something.
Okay.
I don't. That to me is not necessarily fair. But if I,
I mean, I think that's what we're talking about.
I don't think so. I don't think so
I mean,
because
this guy,
well,
I
if
mean,
you're talking about just saying that you identify with something, but that's different from actually transitioning, you know? I don't know. I don't want to talk too much more about
yeah,
this
me
topic
neither.
because I don't want
I
to.
don't want to get in hot water with anybody or
Yeah,
with you.
yeah.
And it's
It's not.
really just a curiosity and like wanting to have discourse that,
Yeah,
where I can maybe learn something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think, like I said, I think in competitive areas that a trans woman who is a woman, she has women hormones, her body has transitioned, like should be competing in women's groups, you know?
Yeah.
So, and if any other women don't like that, then they cannot play.
Yeah.
But do you love that sport enough? More? Would you like be upset by that enough that a sport that you love you wouldn't play because something that someone who you have zero education on and you believe myths about them and you're like, okay, I'm not going to play that sport anymore. Then you didn't like that sport to begin with.
I think you were right earlier when you said that it has to do with fairness for me.
Yeah.
And I guess I think of a world where, you got a 35-year-old human being that has lived they've been masculine their whole life and they've had testosterone and they've developed their body and their muscles and everything as a man.
Hmm.
They're going to be, oh man, this could be totally wrong, but it feels true to me. for a lot of different sports, they will have a competitive advantage because of the testosterone, because of the way the muscles are developed, because of all of
I
that.
mean, they lose after we're talking about after
But
transitioning.
then you just get into
They lose muscle mass.
I
They lose
get
their
that, but
muscle mass.
you'd have to say like,
They don't have testosterone in their body anymore. Like,
but then I don't know that these, I don't know if these organizations are saying in order for you to play as a female, you have to have had done
I
these things for a certain amount of time.
some of them are
Oh,
actually, yeah.
well,
Some of them have.
that
In
makes
fact,
more sense to me.
I think the the NCAA does have a certain time requirement on it.
You had to have had taken some
Yeah,
hormones and done certain things.
I think. I'm not
You got to
100%.
have at least a C cup.
I don't know about that, but I
Joke.
mean, because
That's a joke.
there's cis women who don't have, C
C
cups.
cups.
So,
Okay, you have to have. Yeah,
yeah,
you just took it seriously.
yeah.
He's a joke.
Anyways, I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
hightail it. I hate to have to end
Anything else? That's it.
I think so. Yeah,
This has been a
it's
pleasure.
been awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, this has been Phil Fales at Authenticity and Courage with Nova Martin. She is a poet. Y'all go check out her poetry. She's a druidess, trans and queer right activist, philanthropist, and also just a really awesome person to talk to. I really appreciate you being here today.
I've really enjoyed it, Phil.
Yeah, thank you so much,
I
Nova.
hope I failed dramatically.
No, yeah, let's fail together.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
yeah.